Ladies and gentlemen, let's drop the niceties and face the truth. The world is in turmoil. Wars raging in Ukraine and the Middle East. Pandemics that have crippled economies. Climate chaos striking harder every year. Global supply chains snapping under the weight of uncertainty. And in the middle of this chaos, one nation thinks the solution is tariffs. 50% tariffs. Bullying disguised as economic strategy. But at the Brics summit, India's external affairs minister didn't flinch. He didn't shout. He didn't grandstand. He delivered something far more devastating. The truth. Calm, precise, unshakable. His message: economic practices must be fair, transparent, and for everyone's benefit. Linking trade to non-trade matters will not help. The translation was unmistakable: stop weaponizing trade. Stop playing God with food, fuel, and fertilizer. Because when livelihoods are held hostage, that's not policy, that's cruelty. And India will not bow. Strategic autonomy is not for sale. You cannot slap a 50% penalty on a sovereign nation and expect silence. India is not a pawn, it is a power, in its own right, on its own terms. Jaishankar went further. He exposed the bigger failure: a multilateral system paralyzed and broken. The UN in deadlock, climate change pushed off the agenda. Institutions frozen while billions suffer. Instead of fixing the system, some powers choose to break it further through economic coercion. That is not leadership. That is laziness. That is self-destruction. And then came his vision: resilient supply chains spread across geographies, democratized manufacturing, trade that is open, sustainable, rules-based, inclusive. Not the politics of punishment, but the economics of fairness. The exact opposite of what protectionists like Trump are selling. This wasn't a speech. It was a warning shot. A declaration that India will not be strong-armed. Tariffs don't build bridges. They burn them. Bullying doesn't create stability. It shatters it. At Brics, Jaishankar wasn't just defending India. He was defending fairness itself. And make no mistake, the 50% tariff wasn't trade policy. It was economic blackmail. 25% baseline. Another 25% piled on as punishment for India's oil and defense ties with Russia. That's not economics. That's intimidation. A mafia tactic dressed up as diplomacy. But instead of folding, India turned the tables. Jaishankar's calm words cut deeper than any outburst. His restraint was his weapon. While Trump waved a stick, India held up a mirror. The message was unmistakable: India doesn't take orders. India makes choices. This tariff war revealed something bigger. The world doesn't need more barriers, more restrictions, more chaos. It needs resilience, predictability, trust. Protectionism doesn't strengthen nations, it weakens them. Every time trade is tied to political grudges, trust collapses, supply chains fracture, and the entire system suffers. Jaishankar exposed that truth with brutal clarity. Protectionism isn't patriotism, it's insecurity in disguise. It's sabotage against the very economies it claims to protect by refusing to bend. India wasn't just speaking for itself. It was speaking for the global south. For every nation sick of being treated like a bargaining chip in someone else's power game. And that's the brilliance. This wasn't just India's stand. It was a collective stand. A declaration that the world's majority will not be bullied into obedience. In the end, Jaishankar didn't need theatrics. His calm, deliberate words carried the weight of history. India stood firm, not as a junior partner, not as a submissive player, but as an equal power, unafraid to confront arrogance head-on. That is what a brutal response looks like. Silent thunder, precision, truth. Diplomacy turned into a weapon sharper than any tariff. The true sting of Jaishankar's statement was not in volume, but in precision. It exposed the arrogance of those who thought India could be bent into submission. Trump's 50% tariff was supposed to punish India, a blunt instrument of economic coercion. Instead, it became the spark that pushed India to assert its independence louder and clearer than ever before. Jaishankar flipped the narrative entirely. Rather than appearing as the victim of an economic assault, India stood tall, steady, and unshaken, facing down an unreasonable aggressor. That shift in perception was more powerful than any shouted insult. With calm subtlety, Jaishankar turned diplomacy into a weapon. He didn't name names, but his message was unmistakable. You cannot strong-arm a nation of over 1 billion people into surrendering its sovereignty. You cannot waive tariffs like a club when the stakes are national security and energy independence. India's stand at Brics was not just diplomatic, it was civilizational. It became a rallying cry for the entire global South, for nations long treated like pawns on a Western chessboard. Strategic autonomy was no longer just India's defense. It became the shield of every country tired of economic arm twisting. Jaishankar laid out the world's reality with surgical precision. COVID scars still raw. Wars in Ukraine and the Middle East destabilizing markets. Climate disasters ravaging nations. Food insecurity spreading like fire. Supply chains snapping. Fertilizer shortages crippling farmers. He called the multilateral system what it is: broken. Paralyzed institutions unable to act are failing humanity. No tariff or sanction can disguise that truth. What made his remarks brutal was how he tied these crises directly to human suffering. This wasn't theory, it was reality. Inflation isn't just a statistic, it's families unable to buy food. Supply chain disruptions aren't abstract, their livelihoods destroyed. With quiet authority, Jaishankar shifted the debate from the vanity of power politics to the raw cost paid by ordinary people. And then came his warning: reform is not a luxury, it is survival. The old order is collapsing, the status quo cannot hold. Leadership today requires courage, not coercion. Protectionism and tariffs, he said, do not strengthen economies, they corrode them. Linking trade to politics is not strategy, it is self-destruction. With one stroke, he dismantled decades of economic bullying and showed how protectionism is nothing but short-sighted weakness. He reminded the world of the forgotten principles of trade fairness, transparency, inclusivity, rules-based cooperation. Strip them away and all that remains is chaos. That was his dagger. Protectionism does not create stability, it creates instability. It does not secure livelihoods, it destroys them. India, he pointed out, even confronts trade imbalances with its own Brics partners, proving it practices the fairness it preaches. That credibility made his words undeniable. Then came the masterstroke. Jaishankar widened the lens. He called out institutions born in 1945, designed to preserve Western dominance while billions in the global South remained voiceless. At Brics, he demanded a 21st century order. One where leadership is shared, where the UN Security Council finally reflects modern realities, and where the IMF and World Bank serve humanity, not just the G7. Trump's bluster met its match. He walked in as the self-proclaimed dealmaker, the loudest man in the room. But he was answered not with noise, but with surgical precision. Jaishankar didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His calm defiance stripped Trump's threats bare, showing them for what they were: hollow and outdated. India, through Jaishankar, spoke not just for itself but for billions. The global South found its voice, and the West was forced to listen. Sanctions, threats, intimidation, these belong to yesterday. Today, words, calculated, fearless, and strategic, carry more force than any weapon. This wasn't just diplomacy, it was a masterclass in verbal warfare. India proved that true power is not in shouting the loudest, but in speaking the truth so clearly that even the powerful are left in silence.